Tonight, breaking news, the Omicron variant, now the dominant strain in the U.S. as cases spike just before Christmas. Several states calling in the National Guard to help overwhelmed hospitals. Massive lines for testing and at-home tests flying off the shelves. Several cities now reinstating COVID restrictions, and New York City now considering canceling its iconic New Year's Eve celebration yet again. The surge in cases comes as more than 100 million Americans plan to travel for the holidays, but promising news from Moderna tonight about their booster shot. President Biden also facing another crisis. His nearly $2 trillion Build Back Better plan derailed by fellow Democrat Joe Manchin. What this means for the president's agenda. Garrett Hake is on Capitol Hill. Plus, the fate of Ghislaine Maxwell now in the hands of a jury. The prosecution's scathing closing arguments calling Maxwell a, quote, sophisticated predator who brought young girls to Jeffrey Epstein in exchange for money and status. How soon could we expect a verdict? Escaping captivity, the first images of a group of American missionaries who were held hostage by a gang in Haiti for months. How they say they escaped their kidnappers. Super typhoon, the widespread destruction tonight after a monster Category 5 storm slammed into the Philippines. The death toll skyrocketing and hundreds of thousands of people displaced. But the government there warning they do not have the money for disaster relief. And miraculous discovery, the infants thrown during that deadly tornado outbreak here at home last week. The incredible moment they were found in a bathtub unharmed. Top story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Kate Snow in for Tom tonight. We begin top story with breaking news. The CDC saying Omicron is now the most common variant in the U.S., accounting for 75% of all new infections. The massive lines across the country today as the variant hits the unvaccinated and vaccinated. But experts stress if you're vaccinated and boosted, symptoms are generally mild. Still, hospitalizations are also on the rise. Several states now calling in the National Guard to help with an influx of patients. And this latest wave as holiday travel obviously gets into full swing. More than 30 million Americans expected to pass through airports from now through New Year's. There are new restrictions and cancellations as the virus spreads. In New York City, officials may call off their iconic New Year's Eve celebration, which draws, of course, millions of people to Times Square. But there's also good news on the vaccine front. Moderna now believes its booster can help protect against Omicron. We have a lot to get to tonight. Let's begin with NBC national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez.
Tonight, a COVID surge coast to coast. Omicron now the most dominant variant, making up 3/4 of cases. Testing lines and new restrictions mounting.
It's time for Boston to follow the science.
Boston announcing it'll require proof of vaccination starting next month for some indoor spaces. D.C. is reinstating its mask mandate. At least 6 states have called in the National Guard to ease the strain on hospitals, among them Maine and New Hampshire, which just hit hospitalization records. Today, downtown Los Angeles canceled its in-person New Year's celebration in Grand Park. New York City is considering whether to do the same for its bash in Times Square. The mayor saying he'll make a decision before Christmas.
Thank God, based on everything we've seen so far, the cases are more mild than what we've experienced previously.
Broadway canceling more performances, more sports teams weighing whether to postpone games, and SNL this weekend even going without a live audience or most of its cast.
Where's everybody?
Omicron cases doubling every 2 to 3 days. Ahead of the holidays, the testing lines are eerily familiar.
It's been frustrating to say the least.
This is my 3rd clinic I'm going to today in the last 1 hour.
Still, authorities insist because of vaccines, boosters, and effective treatments.
This is not March of 2020. It's not even December of 2020.
According to the latest CDC data, here's the difference between those who are vaccinated and those who are not. Among the unvaccinated, there are 451 COVID cases per 100,000 people. Among those who are vaccinated, that number drops to 134 cases. Among those boosted, still lower, 48 cases. But here's the crucial part. Among the unvaccinated, there are 6 deaths per 100,000 people. Among the vaccinated, that drops considerably to 0.5. Among those boosted, 0.1.
We're seeing breakthrough infections even in elderly people. If they're boosted, it's turning out to be really mild.
And like Pfizer before it, Moderna is out with its own data, which has not been peer-reviewed, suggesting its half-dose booster shot raises antibody levels by 37-fold.
Bottom line, can this booster stop Omicron?
Our hope is that it really can.
Dr. Stephen Hogue is Moderna's president, who says the company is also looking into developing another booster specific to Omicron.
And the reason is this virus continues to surprise us as it evolves.
That's for sure. Gabe joins us now from outside a testing site here in New York City. Gabe, good to see you. We've been hearing loud and clear that we're surging right now. Just last week, the Omicron was like 3% of cases. So where do things stand right now?
Yeah, Kate, it really is remarkable. The CDC says that this variant now makes up 73% of all new COVID cases, and that helps explain these long testing lines behind me that stretch down the block into the night. New York State just reported another record day of COVID cases for a fourth straight day, Kate.
Don't like that. Gabe, this may be a personal question for me as a parent. What is the latest on whether schools might shut down? A lot of people wondering.
Yeah, it is a big conversation among many parents and their children at this point, Kate. Well, today, New York's governor stressed that schools would not close. D.C. schools, for example, though, they said that they will close next month for 2 days, but only so parents can pick up self-test kits, Kate.
All right, Gabe, thank you so much. Let's dig into travel questions. Now, holiday travel ramping up, of course, the heaviest passenger surge this year. Doctors say travelers who are not vaccinated risk hospitalization and even death. You just saw the numbers in Gabe's piece. Here's Tom Costello with how COVID is changing travel plans.
Despite long lines and little elbow room, Americans are already packing airports and planes, usually shoulder to shoulder.
We're not concerned at all, actually. We felt pretty good everywhere we've gone.
But experts caution only the vaccinated and boosted should feel safe traveling right now.
If you're not vaccinated, I would say travel is really not a great idea because you are in a very vulnerable place now with Omicron.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Masks still required by law, though Southwest Airlines CEO Gary Kelly told Congress last week a plane's air filtration systems do the job.
I think the case is very strong that masks don't add much, if anything, in the air cabin environment.
The next day, Kelly tested positive for COVID. He now says he misspoke, and Southwest fully supports the mask mandate. Nationwide, the TSA expects 30 million passengers between now and January 3rd, approaching, even exceeding 2019 passenger levels at some airports.
Already, Miami is setting all-time records for holiday passenger traffic at 1,000 flights and 156,000 passengers every day.
So we've built quite a bit of experience to know that the travel experience can indeed be a safe one if you follow the recommended safety protocols.
Gonna call you for entry. Fuel on board is 9.0.
The American Airlines ramp tower today juggling more than 700 flights on the ground in Miami.
Where are they going? Do they have enough fuel? Do they have enough catering? Do we have any air traffic that we need to keep an eye out on?
A critical linchpin as a critical week takes off.
So if you have not been vaccinated, most experts say, really, you probably don't want to travel right now. It simply isn't worth the risk. If you are traveling, wear a mask. Of course, it's required. You may consider doubling up on the mask. And if you were to test positive once you arrive at your location, you're going to probably want to quarantine and not travel back to protect everybody else. The bottom line is, as I have traveled now through 20 airports this year, I have seen very little social distancing. It's all about the mask. Kate?
Yeah, Tom, I got to say, same thing. My last week of travel. A lot of travelers looking to get a COVID test, as Tom said, before they meet up with family for the holiday weekend. That is part of the spike in demand for testing right now. It's all leading to these huge long lines at testing sites across the country and a shortage of those over-the-counter at-home tests available at pharmacies. Carrie Sanders has more.
Tonight, there's a new kind of holiday traffic. Cars bumper to bumper and long lines at COVID testing centers across the country.
This is probably one of the shorter lines we've been seeing around the city, and I think we're going to be here for at least 45 minutes.
From Florida, where this location turned away hundreds looking to get tested.
We were so busy that we kind of cut off the line at like 1 or 2.
To this clinic in Maryland, now swabbing 1,000 people a day. The surge comes just days before the holiday weekend and amid increasing spread of the more infectious Omicron variant. Demand for at-home tests is skyrocketing too, leading to shortages in stores and online.
With Omicron and the holidays and the flu season, it's likely there are not enough tests now.
Stock so low, Walgreens has put purchase limits on the popular kits. The Biden administration says a boosted testing effort is in the works. But for those looking for peace of mind before gathering for Christmas, the best place to start is online. Search for appointments through your local health department, which are often free, and pharmacies in your area. But act fast. Health experts say everyone should test 3 days before gathering and be open to options, whether it's PCR or a rapid kit. Any test is better than none. Meanwhile, COVID has the NFL playing defense, postponing 3 games over the weekend after more than 100 players tested positive for the virus, and announcing a major reversal, saying it will no longer require weekly testing for asymptomatic vaccinated players.
We're going to let health and safety guide our decisions and not by competition or television schedules.
Health officials say they recognize it's a hassle because the home testing kits are sold out. Lines like this can be long, but they're urging people to go ahead and still get tested before gathering with family members. Christmas, of course, 5 days away. Kate?
Yeah, but who's counting? Carrie, thank you. With more on the Omicron variant and what you need to know, let's bring in Dr. Uche Blackstock. Dr. Blackstock, I got to start with the big picture, right? We just told all these stories about the increase in cases nationwide, places shutting down. Honestly, how anxious should we all be?
Thank you for having me. I do think that there is reason for concern. You know, this is a variant that spreads very quickly. As we see, it's doubling exponentially. And we're seeing an increase in cases, and we're seeing an increase in hospitalizations in some states as well. So that is the concern. With hospitals already at capacity, we're seeing an increase in hospitalizations. Right. And we don't want to put an extra stress on hospital staff and resources. So I think there still remains a lot to be known about Omicron, especially in terms of disease severity. And that is going to come out over the next few weeks in real life data.
And then we also have this news this morning from Moderna saying that its booster can raise the level of antibodies that fight Omicron. So what is the whole story on that? That seems like really good news.
Right. So this is good news. I will say that it's not peer reviewed yet. It's basically lab data. We do need real life data, but this lab data is essentially showing that with a single booster, it increases antibody levels about 37 times. With a double booster, it increases antibody levels about 80 times. Both doses were overall well tolerated by subjects. But this is great news because we know that if people are boosted, that provides an extra layer of protection against Omicron.
Right, and yet there are a lot of people, vaccinated people I know, people you probably know, experiencing breakthrough cases right now. So based on our evolving knowledge of Omicron, how different is the experience of the variant if you're vaccinated versus if you're not?
Right. So the people that we're really concerned about are the unvaccinated, right? Because they have no protection in their immune system against Omicron. We're seeing that even with fully vaccinated people, they are getting those breakthrough infections that you mentioned. We haven't seen it directly related to increase in hospitalizations per se. We don't know what part is Omicron versus the Delta variant. But the people who are most well protected are those people who are fully vaccinated plus boosted. And we need to really encourage, we only have 1 in 6 Americans that are fully boosted right now. We need to encourage more people to get their first-time vaccinations and those who are fully vaccinated to get boosted immediately.
And just lastly, can we go back through some of the things we can do as we go to holiday gatherings and get together with family? We just heard Carrie Sanders say you could get tested 3 days before gathering. What else should we be keeping in mind?
Right. I would say the most important thing to keep in mind is who your most vulnerable family member or loved one is. Is it a child that remains unvaccinated? Is it an older relative who's elderly or immunocompromised? But things that you can do are that rapid test right before the gathering is probably the most accurate test that you can get. It will tell you whether not only if you're infected, but if you're infectious, whether you're contagious to your relatives. So that's something that if you can get your hand on a rapid test, you want to do. You also want to keep windows open, doors open, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. If you can do it outdoors, if you're in nice weather, that is ideal as well.
So the 3 days before is if you're getting a PCR regular test. If it's rapid, you can take it sooner, like right before you fly or right before you get in the car?
Right. And that 3 days is because it takes the laboratory a few days to process that PCR test. That's where we are. And sometimes it takes even longer.
Dr. Uche Blackstock, great advice. Thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it. Let's go to Washington now. President Biden is going to address the COVID crisis in a speech tomorrow as he faces growing pressure over his COVID response and also the apparent collapse of a key piece of his domestic agenda at the hands of a fellow Democrat. NBC senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake has more for us tonight.
Tonight, President Biden facing a dual nightmare before Christmas, a new COVID surge gripping the country, and his domestic agenda now derailed by a Democrat. Today, Senator Joe Manchin firing back after fellow Democrats and the White House blasted his announcement that he won't back the president's massive $1.7 trillion social spending and climate bill.
I want social reforms to the point that has responsibility and accountability.
Manchin has said the bill spends too much money too freely, including on a paid family leave program he opposes and on child tax credit direct payments. And Manchin suggesting the pressure tactics he's faced from some activists during negotiations, including surrounding his houseboat and blocking his car, backfired.
I'm from West Virginia. I'm not from where they're from, and they can just beat the living crap out of people and think they'll be submissive,
leaving progressives fuming.
Well, I think what Senator Manchin did yesterday represents such an egregious breach of the trust of the president.
And Republicans who uniformly oppose the bill celebrating.
We have absolutely seen Christmas come early this year. Shout out to Joe Manchin for doing the right thing.
That blow to the president's agenda just a day before his critical speech on the COVID surge, where he's expected to lay out a dire warning to the unvaccinated and increase access to testing. But now, with more Americans dead of COVID this year than in 2020, the president's COVID response facing scrutiny just a few months after he touted big progress.
We're closer than ever to declaring our independence from a deadly virus.
And Garrett joins us now from D.C. So, Garrett, with this huge blow to the Biden administration, the Build Back Better Act, what is next? Can they salvage any of it?
Well, Kate, Democrats from the vice president to the Speaker of the House on down to the rank and file are saying tonight that this bill and its priorities are too big to simply let them die at the hands of one other Democratic senator. They're vowing to find some way to push forward, whether that's a vote on the Senate floor as soon as senators come back next year or starting this process over. They're saying they will not give up on these priorities.
All right, Garrett Hake, thank you. For more on what this could all mean for President Biden, PBS NewsHour White House correspondent, host of Washington Week on PBS and NBC News, political contributor Yamiche Alcindor is with me now. Hi, good to see you. Where to begin? Senator Manchin delivers this blow on Fox News. He doesn't apparently speak with the White House beforehand. What's the sense within the White House now, Yamiche, about what happened?
Well, Kate, the White House is really feeling blindsided. You can feel the anger when you talk to officials, and they released that lengthy statement that was personally signed off by President Biden. He often signs off on the White House press secretary's statements, but this one's notable because it was lengthy and it was biting. And what it essentially said was that that Senator Manchin was going back on his word. They said that he promised to continue conversations, and then he went on Fox News and essentially walked that back. They also said that this was really a sudden reversal and a breach of commitment to the president. Today, the White House press secretary, she had a little different tone. She was still saying that Joe Manchin and Joe Biden, that they're longtime friends, that they share values. But you can really see that this is a strained relationship. There's a war of words going on. And it's really anyone's guess whether or not the Build Back Better Act will ever become law, because Joe Manchin seems very dug in, and he's been blaming White House aides, not the president directly, but he said that there are White House aides who did, quote, inexcusable things that drove him to reject the Build Back Better Act.
So at this moment, how much trouble is the overall Biden agenda in?
I mean, that is the key question. It's in a lot of trouble, frankly. The Build Back Better Act was really the heart of the president's agenda. He had so many things wrapped into that bill. That's why it's so big. It was climate change. It's health care. It's extending, of course, the Affordable Care Act. And then when you add to that the idea that we're in the middle of a COVID spike, so there's also relief to people who need it, like the child tax credit. And then, of course, there are Democrats, especially African Americans, who make up a large part of the Democratic base, who are saying, where are the voting rights bills? Where are the policing reform bills? These are, of course, things that the president promised Democrats, and none of that has come to pass.
Right.
So it is a tough position for the White House.
Because they were prioritizing the Build Back Better thing first, right, before they got to all these other initiatives. I have to ask about the COVID speech tomorrow. Omicron, president going to be talking about that. Can you give us a preview? What more do we know about what steps he might announce?
Well, the White House is saying that this is going to be a significant speech and that the president is going to be talking about expanding testing around the country, and that he's also going to be talking about making sure that hospitals have the resources they need to deal with this latest spike of the pandemic. The big questions, of course, are going to be how quickly are the tests going to be there? We saw the long lines and all the different packages today on NBC News and MSNBC. It's clearly an issue there. There's also this real big question of masking, sort of what should be the protocols, because there's been some mixed messaging, of course, because the science, the White House says, is continuously evolving. So we should also hear the president make a really forceful case for getting vaccinated. He's been saying over and over again, get vaccinated, get boosted. The big problem, of course, is that the original sin, I would say, of this pandemic was that it was politicized. So the people who really need to hear that most, the people who are most vaccine hesitant in this country, who are Republicans, especially white male Republicans, they are not the person who Joe Biden, frankly, is the best messenger for, based on my sources. So the White House is still trying to figure out a strategy to convince the Americans who are very, very vaccine hesitant, and some of them who are frankly listening to disinformation about the vaccines, how they're going to convince them to get this vaccine and really be more safe around this pandemic.
A lot to do. Yamiche, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it. Great to see you. Up next, the manslaughter trial of former police officer Kim Potter, now in the hands of the jury. As the prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments today, Potter says she fired her gun instead of her taser accidentally in April, fatally wounding Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Ron Allen has more.
The defendant told you her sons will be home for the holidays. But you know who won't be home for the holidays is Dante Wright.
In final arguments, prosecutors asking the jury to look at the video of the fatal traffic stop and use common sense, accusing former officer Kimberly Potter of making rash and reckless choices by firing her gun after warning she was about to fire a taser.
She chose to engage. She chose to use force. She chose to escalate. She knew she had both weapons on her duty belt. She knew how to get it right. But she failed to get it right. She failed Dante Wright.
Potter, age 49, facing manslaughter charges in the same courtroom where a jury convicted former officer Derek Chauvin of murdering George Floyd.
Dante Wright caused his own death, unfortunately. Those are the cold, hard facts.
Potter's attorneys telling the jury the former officer's use of her gun or a taser was justified because she feared police at the scene could be seriously injured if Wright got back into his car and drove off.
No threat by Dante Wright. He broke free from a law enforcement officer and took off in his car even after he was shot. No threat.
I would have preferred had Dante Wright followed the commands and not tried to flee, sure. Does that absolve her from liability? Does that allow her to shoot him to death? It does not.
Ron Allen joins me now from Minneapolis. Hi, Ron. Good to see you. So you've been covering this trial from the very beginning. What stood out to you today about these closing arguments on both sides?
The defense really went hard at the argument that Dante Wright caused his own death. They say that everything that happened was basically because of him trying to evade arrest. And if he doesn't do that, none of the other problems happen, is what they're saying. And they were pretty clear about it. On the prosecution side, they said, look at the video to the jury. Use your common sense. You see what happens. She shoots and kills him. And the fact that he was trying to evade arrest, it doesn't mean that you can just do that. She still has to arrest him lawfully. So it's been a trial filled with a lot of very emotional testimony from Wright's mother, his father, his girlfriend, who was the passenger. There's been a lot of graphic video, powerful video that hadn't been seen by the public before. So the jury has it all there. They've seen it all. The question is now, do they see this as Potter doing good police work, or do they see her committing a crime? The charge is manslaughter. Basically, the prosecution is saying that she recklessly used her gun, and that's what caused Dante Wright to death. And the prosecution kept coming back to the fact, as she said there in this story, that he's not going to be there at home for the holidays.
Yeah. All right, Ron Allen, thank you. I know you'll stay there for us. Thanks so much. Turning now to another high-profile case, the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. The prosecution making their case to the jury, trying to convince the courtroom the former British socialite lured underage girls into the orbit of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The defense arguing Maxwell is on trial for the disgraced financier's crimes, for his crimes. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns has the latest.
Tonight, Ghislaine Maxwell's fate in the hands of a jury. Maxwell, a longtime confidant of Jeffrey Epstein, facing 6 criminal counts, including sex trafficking and charges she conspired to entice and transport underage girls for Epstein. In closing arguments today, the prosecution calling the 2 partners in crime who exploited young girls together. Their case centering on the claims of 4 women who say they were sexually abused by Epstein, alleging Maxwell helped recruit and groom them, sometimes even taking part in the sex acts herself. All 4 say they were teenagers at the time. The prosecution calling Maxwell a, quote, sophisticated predator, trading young girls for money and status, showing that Maxwell received a total of $30.7 million from Epstein, telling the jury, quote, when Maxwell took the money, she knew what it was for, and now you do too. The defense arguing their client is a proxy for Epstein, who died in prison, saying she's being tried here for being with Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe that was the biggest mistake of her life, but that was not a crime. The defense also arguing the accusers want a payday, that the case against their client was built on false memories. Maxwell has pleaded not guilty, denying all accusations against her.
At its core, it is a sexual assault case, and that is driven by the victim witnesses who get up on the stand, point at the defendant, and say, that's the person that did this to me. So ultimately, credibility is everything.
The verdict could come before the Christmas holiday, the same day as Maxwell's 60th birthday.
And Dasha Burns joins us now. So, Dasha, experts who've been watching this trial, I understand, are saying we shouldn't be surprised if there's a quick verdict.
Yeah, Kate, that's right. The legal experts I've been speaking with say while there's a lot of evidence that this jury needs to go over, at the end of the day, this is really going to hinge on whether or not those witnesses were believable. And if the jury decides they believe them, or perhaps they even already decided they believe each of those witnesses, then that verdict could really come back pretty quickly here, Kate.
All right, Dasha, thank you. Still ahead, daring escape. The American missionaries back in the U.S. after they were kidnapped by a gang in Haiti. How they managed to break free. Plus, former President Trump suing New York's Attorney General, what he's now accusing her of as she investigates his business practices, and the massive fire ripping through a QVC plant just before the holidays. The grim discovery when crews were finally able to get inside. Stay with us. Top story, just getting started. We're back now with the hostages who escaped capture in Haiti, those missionaries appearing on video for the first time since their release earlier this month. Their Ohio-based religious group giving the details now of how they made it out. Maura Barrett reports.
Tonight, new details on how those hostages in Haiti escaped from their kidnappers. The 12 people returned to the U.S. over the weekend, seen here for the first time on video. After being held for more than 2 months by a Haitian gang, their Ohio-based religious group, Christian Aid Ministries, detailing the group's harrowing escape in a press conference.
They also followed the sure guidance of the stars as they journeyed through the night, traveling toward safety.
According to Christian Aid Ministries, the group, including a 10-month-old and a 3-year-old, walked an estimated 10 miles after breaking out of a blocked door and slipping by guards.
They quickly made their way through the night, traveling through woods and thickets, working through thorns and briars. One of the hostages said, and I quote, 2 hours were through fierce brambles. We were in gang territory the whole hike.
The group eventually finding someone who helped them make a phone call for help.
They were finally free.
Those hostages, part of the 17 people kidnapped in October by the 400 Mawozo gang, as they were returning from an orphanage visit an hour and a half away from the ministry's base. According to Haitian officials, the gang's leader was demanding $1 million per hostage, totaling $17 million.
This ordeal has taken a long time and has been a difficult experience. We will always be grateful for the work of others who gathered around us through encouragement, prayers, and assistance as we labored to bring our workers home.
Blessed is the man that trusteth in him.
More of those details are incredible. You're with us now from Chicago. So how are they feeling? How's their health?
Well, Kate, Christian Aid Ministries say that the hostages were not physically harmed by the kidnappers, though some of the young children did get sick, assumed from the heat, mosquitoes, or contaminated water. But the adults did receive small food portions every day, and apparently the captors did give the children adequate food as well. So everyone back in the U.S. tonight and physically okay.
Well, some good news more. Thank you. When we come back, the parking garage collapse. A worker presumed dead after a stairwell gave way. The concern tonight over the structure's safety. And super typhoon, the devastating storm hitting hundreds, killing hundreds, and leaving unprecedented damage across the Philippines. The search now for survivors. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with a parking garage collapse in Florida. Officials say a stairwell was under construction in Clearwater when it gave way. At least one worker is presumed dead. Another person on site was not injured. Engineers now investigating whether the rest of that four-story parking garage is safe. The investigation continues tonight into that devastating fire at a QVC plant in North Carolina. New aerial footage shows the smoking wreckage as fire crews continue to put out hot spots. The massive fire started on Saturday morning and destroyed more than 75% of that giant warehouse. A 21-year-old employee was found dead on Sunday. Officials say the father of one had just started working there 3 weeks ago. Former President Trump has sued New York's Attorney General Letitia James. The suit is trying to stop her long-running civil tax probe into Trump's business practices and stop the Attorney General from aiding in a separate criminal investigation. The former president is accusing James of abusing her powers to target political opponents. James responding, quote, "Our investigation will continue undeterred." And a consumer alert tonight. Procter & Gamble recalling dozens of popular dry shampoo products. The affected items sold under brands such as Pantene, Herbal Essences, and Aussie. The company says they contain benzene, a cancer-causing chemical. So far, no reactions have been reported. We turn now to Money Talks, what consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. Global markets taking a big hit today amid concerns about the surging Omicron variant. The new coronavirus strain now in 85 countries, causing fears more lockdowns could be coming. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Ruhle joins me now to break it all down. So, Steph, after the initial talk of the Omicron variant, I remember the markets took a hit. But then since then, they had stabilized and grew. And now, today, the Dow is down, I think, more than 600 points at one point. What's going on?
It is. We've had 3 pretty lousy trading days, all on these fears and concerns that Omicron is going to cause more lockdowns and restrictions, not just here, but we're seeing it abroad. And remember, over the last few months, as the economy has been reopening, people are out there spending and traveling and visiting one another. So the concerns are if Omicron continues to spread and we have to change our behavior, that's going to hurt the economy. And if we don't all head back to work, which many of us were planning to do come the new year, that's going to impact all sorts of businesses, big and small.
Right, and we are consumer driven, as you say, so it's the holiday shopping season. The headlines have all been about Omicron. From what you can see, is that having an impact, or are people still spending money?
Well, it's too soon to tell. When we look at the overall retail season, we have seen a lot of spending, very strong retail. Remember, there were lots of concerns that shelves would be empty in stores and supply chain issues. But from the big retailers we've spoken to, Walmart, Target, their inventories have been up and people are out there spending. And remember, even if we get a not so hot last week because people are worried about Omicron, people were shopping earlier this year because we've been warning them about those supply chain issues. So when you look at October and November and December and pull them all together, we're likely still going to see very strong numbers.
All right, Steph, thank you. Heading overseas now to Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai. This weekend appearing in her first interview since her disappearance, seeming to take back her accusation of sexual assault against a high-ranking Chinese official. Tonight, the new concerns that reversal might have been coerced. Janice Mackey-Freyer reports tonight from Beijing.
New comments raising more questions around Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai, who reemerged this weekend at a ski event in Shanghai with basketball star Yao Ming and other athletes. In a video posted by a Singaporean newspaper, Peng purportedly reverses her accusation, telling a reporter there during an impromptu interview where it's unclear how freely she can speak, "I have never said or written about anyone sexually assaulting me," adding there may have been a lot of misunderstandings about an affair with Zhang Gaoli, a former Communist Party official, that included an encounter where she says she, quote, never consented and was, quote, crying all the time. The purported video interview that cannot be verified by NBC News is the first time Peng has spoken about the explosive scandal that triggered international outcry, including calls to boycott Beijing's Olympics and an outpouring of concern from across the tennis world. That Peng appears to reverse her assertion, only stoking skepticism that the former world #1 doubles champion is facing pressure here to make the scandal go away.
This is a story with the Olympics around the corner that kind of ticks a lot of boxes in terms of global headlines and sensitivities.
Peng apparently told the newspaper, "I've been very free all along," yet she wasn't asked about her relationship with Zhang, the assault allegation, or disappearing for weeks from public view. The Women's Tennis Association holding firm to its demand for a full, fair, and transparent investigation without censorship into her allegation of sexual assault, stirring fresh criticism of China and persisting concern for Peng Shuai.
Janice Mackey-Frayer joins me now live from Beijing. Great to see you, Janice. You mentioned in your piece the WTA not backing down from their calls for an investigation into her original allegations. What more can you tell us about reaction to this latest video?
Well, the WTA is not convinced. It's been 49 days now, and they've not been able to have direct contact with Peng Shuai. There's also a consistency, Kate, to how these videos and messages about Peng Shuai's well-being are appearing, usually tied to English language Twitter accounts that are linked to state media employees, but not state media channels themselves. And the journalists are usually saying that they were sent by a friend, suggesting that not even state media journalists have direct contact with her. As well, this Singaporean newspaper, it's a Chinese language newspaper, it's considered to be pro-Beijing, and it's not accessible to anybody in mainland China without a VPN. So all of it suggesting that this campaign of messaging to try and telegraph this idea that Peng Shuai is okay is being curated very much for an international audience. It's not accessible by people here. It's still a banned topic, and her name is still unsearchable on China's internet.
Wow. All right, Janice, thank you so much for the coverage. Appreciate it. Turning now to the Americas, a look at the stories coming out of the U.S. and across Latin America. Chile has elected a new president after a runoff election between far left and far right candidates. The winner, the leftist, and the new president will be the youngest ever for a country going through major social, political, and economic changes. NBC's Guad Venegas has the story.
35-year-old Gabriel Boric will become the new president of Chile.
Chilenos y chilenas, recibo este mandato con humildad y con un tremendo sentido de responsabilidad.
A leftist former student leader, Boric rode a wave of populism in Chile, promising major investments in public spending, canceling student debt, and raising the taxes of the wealthy.
Que combata firmemente los privilegios de unos pocos y trabaje cada día por la calidad de la familia chilena.
Chile now joins countries like Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, and just a few weeks ago, Honduras, where left-wing governments have taken over in what's becoming a major shift for Latin American politics. Boric defeated right-wing candidate José Antonio Cast, who campaigned on less taxes for corporations, stricter policies against migrants, and abolishing abortion.
Lo primero que quiero hacer es felicitar a Gabriel Boric. Él se merece todo nuestro respeto, ganó en muy buena lid, muchos chilenos confiaron en él y esperamos que tenga un muy buen gobierno.
Important words coming from the defeated party. It wasn't so long ago that Chile was in a dictatorship under Pinochet, and the country is at its most polarized point since then. Boric's win comes after massive protests and riots took place across Chile in 2019. The protesters demanding better education opportunities, improved pensions, and overhauling the current economic system they said favors the elite. The newly elected president supporting those changes. Boric also pledged to improve women's rights and economic standing in Chile. people out in the streets celebrating yesterday.
Estoy muy alegre, muy esperanzada. Creo que él va a tener una forma de gobernar muy diferente.
Yet today, the market had a different response to the election. The value of the country's peso fell, and its dollar-denominated stock index slumped 10%. Throughout the campaign, opponents of Boric pointed towards Venezuela as a warning of shifting too far to the left.
Todo el mundo especula de que va a haber una gran crisis y esa crisis no es porque de la noche a la mañana no hay.
Boric is set to take office on March 11th of next year, which will mark the beginning of a new era for Chile.
So interesting. Guad Venegas joins me now from Los Angeles. So, Guad, Chile also waiting for a group of legislators, as I understand it, to finish drafting a new constitution next year, which could bring even more change for the country. Why are they doing that?
Well, Kate, last year, Chileans overwhelmingly voted to create this new constitution, electing new legislators that come from all parts of society. Now, these are doctors, lawyers, teachers, actors, social workers, half of them are women. And the idea, they say, is to take away power from the elite classes. Now, once that constitution is written, the people will have to approve it once again. Kate.
All right, Guad Venegas, thank you. Now to Top Stories Global Watch, and we begin with another weekend of violent protests in Sudan. Security forces using tear gas and stun grenades on hundreds of thousands of protesters. At least one person killed and hundreds injured there. An estimated 45 people have died during protests since the country's coup back in October. Thousands protesting in Belgium over COVID-19 restrictions. Demonstrators marching through Brussels for a third time. Protesters included healthcare workers who now have a 3-month window to get vaccinated or lose their jobs. Similar demonstrations held over the weekend in Paris and London. And Israel is banning travel to several countries, including the U.S., over the Omicron variant. Israelis will not be able to travel to the U.S., and anyone returning must quarantine for 2 weeks. The ban expected to take effect on Wednesday. Foreign nationals are not allowed to enter Israel, which has seen a surge in cases in recent weeks. In the Philippines, they are reeling from the devastation of Super Typhoon Rai, the monster storm hitting with the strength of a Category 5 storm. NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard has that story.
Tonight, at least 375 now confirmed dead in the Philippines. These images showed the wake of one of the country's deadliest typhoons ever, Super Typhoon Rai, sweeping through the southern and central provinces of the country at the end of last week. The devastation only now becoming clear as the search intensifies for possible survivors. At least 50 are still missing. The national police say more than 500 are injured too.
The typhoon has devastated much of the islands. Many communities that are already struggling to survive now have another hurdle.
The storm deemed a super typhoon. These NASA images showing the more than 150-mile-per-hour winds making landfall as a Category 5 storm and barreling through the country. The scenes horrific as floodwaters overtook communities. Rescuers saving as many as they could from the rising waters, including this infant in a bucket. The extreme rains and winds forcing citizens to scramble for cover. Islands now ravaged. Downed power lines and communications have still paralyzed several provinces. More than 220 localities were without power this weekend.
To what extent are we still trying to determine what the damage is?
There's not necessarily a very smooth and streamlined governmental response. And the government as a whole has difficulties financing relief efforts to begin with.
The country's president saying this weekend that the government doesn't have adequate funding to help for disaster relief, claiming the pandemic has dried up its funds. This typhoon hearkening the country back to the turmoil it's endured since 2013, when Typhoon Haiyan left catastrophic damage through some of these same provinces. That tropical cyclone killing more than 6,300 Filipinos. Today, the impact of Typhoon Rai, raw and real. Hundreds dead and few resources for those who held on as desperation grows.
And Vaughn joins us now from another socially distanced camera here at 30 Rock. Hi, Vaughn. So your piece mentioned just now that massive typhoon in 2013. How often is this happening?
We're talking about 20 storms or typhoons that are hitting the Philippines every year now. But even more concerning is the fact that there have been 3 Category 5 typhoons that have hit these islands in just the last 2 years. The frequency of these storms makes the recovery efforts that much more debilitated. And you've got to take into account, too, that so many of these provinces here in the southern and central part of the Philippines, they don't have basic running water or basic power or electricity before these storms even hit. So when these Category 5 typhoons make landfall here, you can see from those images, it just makes the state for this country so difficult.
Yeah,
Kate?
just devastating. Vaughn, thank you. Coming up, surviving a tornado, the woman putting her 2 infant grandchildren in a bathtub before a tornado tore through her home last week, where authorities found the children unharmed, and the 7-year-old survivor making strides in her recovery. We're back now with stories of survival emerging after those deadly tornadoes in Kentucky. 2 babies were found safe in a bathtub after their grandmother's home was destroyed by a twister, and a 7-year-old making remarkable strides in her recovery. As a tornado approached Clara Lutz's home, the Kentucky grandmother ran to the bathroom, putting her 2 infant grandchildren, 15-month-old Caden and 3-month-old Dallas, in her bathtub, surrounded by blankets, a pillow, and a Bible, and holding on.
I felt the rumbling. I felt the shaking of the house. Next thing I knew, the tub had lifted, and it was out of my hands. I couldn't hold on. Oh my God.
As the storm passed, her house and the bathtub gone.
I was looking everywhere to see where the tub may be. I had no clue at all where these babies was. All I could say is, Lord, please bring my babies back to me safely. Please, I beg thee.
Her prayers answered. Hopkins County Sheriff's deputies arrived to help.
I got in the sheriff's car right down at the end of my driveway. They opened up the door and brought me Caden, my 15-month-old. It wasn't long after that they brought baby Dallas, my 3-month-old, brought him to me.
They'd found the bathtub upside down in her front yard. Underneath that bathtub in the pouring rain, both grandchildren completely dry. Hundreds of miles away in Missouri, 7-year-old Evelyn Rackley also took shelter in a bathtub, her parents sending this photo to her great aunt.
They knew where they were going to be in their safe spot.
15 minutes later, a tornado ripped through their home, killing Ava's older sister, Aniston.
She was a wonderful, wonderful little girl. And I'm going to miss her so much. I already do.
But Ava, along with her younger sister, survived.
Ava had multiple scrapes and cuts, lacerations, abrasions all over her body.
On Sunday, less than a week after undergoing spinal surgery, this moment, Ava walking and smiling.
Look at you go, look at you go, look at you go.
Doctors expect her to wear a brace for a few months before making a full recovery. Amazing survival stories. We want to thank our NBC affiliate WFIE for their help with that story. And personally, I want to thank them for helping me in the field last week, too. Ava's family says she's expected to be released from the hospital real soon. When we come back, it is the season of giving. And up next, we're going to introduce you to one Santa helping families in need and how he's having volunteers of all ages share in the true meaning of Christmas. And finally on Top Story, a story about spreading holiday cheer and the Santa who's teaching others just how great it feels to give.
Oh, who likes to draw pictures?
While the elves are busy at the North Pole.
Well, follow me in.
This Santa, Courtney Lofton, is busy at his North Ridge workshop in Southern California.
I had to grow the beard. I just felt that was probably the first sign of the calling. Oh, lots of happy faces here.
A professional contractor on the side, he's been helping others during the holidays for more than a decade.
Isn't that fun?
Yes. But officially started the Red Sled Santa Foundation almost 2 years ago.
This is the clay building I made.
The nonprofit aims to create a meaningful Christmas by providing gifts and financial assistance to families in need.
And if I can bring just a little sparkle of love and happiness and keep the magic of Christmas alive, I'm going to keep doing it.
This year, he opened his workshop to the community, a chance for others to help too.
Well, hello!
Inviting groups like the Young Adult Club from the Inland Valley Down Syndrome Association.
You're all in junior elf training today.
Showing volunteers how to make toys.
Very good. Now let's tie a knot.
Giving them a sense of purpose and pride.
Perfect. We're teaching a child to make something from their own hands, from their own heart, and that makes it even more special. This is the fun part. Are you ready?
Yeah. For elves like Brooke Beard, the opportunity to make and help give out these gifts is a joy.
I couldn't wait for this day to come.
Wow, you've got some good stuff in here, too.
A special day for their parents, too.
We're just excited to be here. I mean, excited for our kids to be excited to give back to others.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose.
So far, the Red Sled Santa Foundation has donated nearly 7,000 toys.
All kinds of fun stuff.
This group also offering a donation, helping Santa make smiles for many more.
This is a donation from our group for you, so you can go help some more children.
This is so wonderful.
Sharing the true meaning of Christmas.
Santa doesn't come down from the chimney. He comes from the heart.
All year long.
Now, you're official Santa's helpers.
Oh, I love it. Santa says he wants to keep growing the foundation, expanding to meet the needs, not just in his community, but all over the nation. Thank you so much for watching Top Story. I'm Kate Snow, in tonight for Tom. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.